Hi everybody, my name is John Carver, and today I want to share some thoughts with you on, are you qualified? That's a pretty deep subject to talk about, but you'll get where I'm going here in a few minutes. Henry Ford said one time, he says, you can't build a reputation on what you're going to do. You know, we can want to do stuff all day long, but until we start doing stuff, nothing's really going to happen. When we were trying to buy a house, we had to qualify for a loan. When I wanted to buy a new car, I had to qualify for a car loan. And most people think, at least a lot of people think, that they have to qualify in certain people's eyes in certain categories in order to do great things. In the book of Isaiah, he was a prophet, and he was slightly intimidated when he was asked to do certain things and to take on certain tasks. But he said, you know, I'm willing to do what you want me to do. In Hebrews 13, it says, may he equip you with all that you need to do. May he produce in you through the power of Jesus Christ and every good thing that is pleasing to him. All glory be to him forever and ever. In Ephesians, it says, for we are God's workmanship, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. Again, good works, good things, good deeds. In Jeremiah was a young man, and he was intimidated. He was scared out of his mind. But in time, he realized that he had a task to do, so he just went ahead and did it. Paul said in the book of Philippians, he said, for it is God who works to do in you both to will for his good pleasure. Again, that's just a few examples of what the Bible says, that we should be able to do good things for other people, whether or not we think we are qualified. There's times, listen, there's times when you become qualified because of your experiences. Think about that a minute. You know, I'm a big, I get really frustrated over some employers, no offense if you're an employer who thinks this way, but some employers think that because you have a piece of paper, you know, something from college that says that you know what you're talking about, but yet they ignore people with 20 or 25 years of experience in that same field without a degree because they don't have a piece of paper. That just blows my mind out of the water because that certainly doesn't make sense. Again, there are times when you become qualified because of your experiences. Some people call it the university of adversity, the university of hard times, of difficulties. Now, the connections and the relationships that you build with people in your life can increase the level of your qualifications. Sometimes it's not what you know, it's, what is it? It's who you know. And I think sometimes you and I forget the fact that we have the ability to impact people's lives in a way that maybe we don't even recognize. In the book of Genesis, it talks about a young man by the name of Joseph, and Joseph went through some really difficult times. In fact, his brothers were so mad at him, they put him in a position where his father thought that Joseph had passed away. Not only that, there was a time when Joseph was then, his brothers sold him into slavery. And it's a really long story, but Joseph went through some really, really bad stuff. But his attitude was amazing in the middle of his difficulty. I'm telling you, I am no Joseph. I am not. Sometimes there are days when my attitude really sucks, to be brutally blunt with you, because of what I'm going through. And I think you're not too much different than that your attitude is really stinky, really sucky because of what is going on around you in your life. But Joseph, he was able to have this attitude of humility in the middle of his difficulty. I'm not there yet. But if you fast forward to the end of the book of Genesis here, Joseph was placed in a situation, it's really a long story behind it. I don't have the time to get into all of it. But he was placed in a situation where he was able to save hundreds of thousands of lives that would not have happened if he was not sold into slavery. And then eventually he was able to reconnect with his family because without knowing it, his family came to where he was residing at the time, and Joseph had a choice of either, fooey on you sold me into slavery, or to embrace them and love them in the middle of their difficult times. And I think that's a challenge for all of us, that when we come across certain situations in our lives, are we going to deal with this with integrity? Are we going to deal with it in a negative way, or our emotions are going to get in the way? I know what I want to do. I want to fight back when I get punched in the face. I think you're probably the same way. When you and I see life one way, it can derail our hopes and dreams. Again, when you and I see life one way, it can derail our hopes and our dreams. And there's something that can destroy your qualifications. So if you partner with the wrong people, or maybe you choose to hang around people with no character or no integrity, then your qualifications can be tarnished, because the old saying is birds of a feather tend to flock together. So when you choose to hang around people that don't have the integrity that you need to see, then it's going to impact you in a dramatic way. Over in 2 Peter chapter 1, it says that this is Peter. Now Peter, just let me back up a minute. Peter was one of Christ's followers. He was one of Christ's students. He was a hothead. He was probably the oldest of the 12 students that Jesus chose to hang around him. But Peter, he had some problems. He had a temper, like some of us. We have a temper sometimes, and he was doubtful at times. But Christ saw some opportunities in him. So years after Christ died, he wrote this. He says, "I'm writing to you who share the same faith that we have. This faith was given to you because of the justice and fairness of Jesus. May God give you more and more grace and peace as you grow in your knowledge of God and Jesus Christ." But then he gets a little more deep. He says in verse 3, "By his divine power, God has given us everything we need to live a godly life." And let me share that again. God's given us everything we need to live a godly life. We have received all of this by coming to know him, the one who has called us to himself by means of his marvelous glory and excellence. And because of his glory and excellence, he's given all these good things. He goes on down a little bit more, that we're supposed to run away from, my paraphrase, run away from the corruption that starts in a greedy attitude. That is, when you and I choose not to hang around the right people, then by default, we're going to start acting like the people that are not so good to hang around. I can't say that enough, because I think you've experienced it too, that when you choose to hang around people that don't have integrity, that don't have honor, that are angry most of the time, then what's going to happen more times than not? We're not going to always change them for the good, although we should try, but more times than not, they're going to potentially bring us down too. So in verse 5, Peter goes on to say that we're supposed to supplement your faith, he says, with a generous amount of moral excellence, and moral excellence with knowledge. So my takeaway from at least this piece of his words are your inner circle sometimes determine your qualifications. Again, the folks that are closest to you can determine what your qualifications are. So you have to build and protect your reputation. I can't say that enough times. You have to build and protect your reputation. Dr. Angela Wang wrote that you need to be honest. She said, when you have a reputation, it's usually built over months or years. She says, based largely on your actions, but sometimes your words as well. And yet, how many of us think about how we are perceived by others as we go about our daily personal and professional lives, being honest and having integrity? We learn to tell white lies or half-truths in order to make the process of getting along with others easier. She says, number 2, keep your promises. Keep your promises. One thing you quickly find out, she says, when you're trying to organize an activity or run a committee is who you can count on to follow through on their commitments. Somebody told my mom one time, they said, if you want something done, give a project to someone who's getting stuff done. You don't want to give a project to people who aren't getting anything done, because probably it's not going to get done. She goes on to say that reputations are fragile. Reputations are fragile. Even though I worked hard over the last 2 years to establish my practice, the shadow of an accusation can cast a big shadow on my reputation. So it's really, really important that if you want to maintain integrity, if you want to maintain an image that is above board, then you need to be careful not only what you do and what you say, but who you hang around. In the last several months, man, I've posted online some pretty stupid stuff out of my emotion, out of my anger, out of my frustration. That's still coming back to haunt me today even, because I said some stupid stuff. I didn't think things through before my fingers started working. I think that's happened to you too at least once or twice. Over in the book of Hebrews, in chapter 13, it says, again, may he equip you with all you need to do, that is God, to do God's will, and may he produce in you, through the power of Jesus Christ, every good thing that's pleasing to him. So I'm not suggesting to you that you have to have all the answers. I'm not saying that at all. I am saying that if you want to dramatically change your life and other people's lives, then consider at least surrendering your life to God in a way that you then will look to God for strength and ways to serve other people. That's really what following Jesus Christ's teachings is really all about. That is finding ways to serve other people. So your perceived qualifications are, like I said before, are partly determined by the company you keep and the partnerships you forge. When I was younger, I had no problem with partnering with people that may not be so ethical. However, they were allowing me to do well in that environment. Financially, I was doing very well. And I didn't realize maybe at the time that I turned my back on integrity. I compromised what I knew was the right thing to do for the sake of big money. And that's a wrong, don't follow that pattern, by the way. And it cost me way more than that over time because of compromise, because of setting aside what I knew was the right thing to do. Wayne Dyer said one time, your reputation is in the hands of others. Again, your reputation is in the hands of others. That's what the reputation is. You can't control that. The only thing you can control is your character, what's really down in the very core of who you are. That's your character. So what's in your character comes out in your reputation and how people see you. Michael Bassey Johnson wrote, don't destroy yourself by allowing negative people and gibberish and debris into your character, into your soul, or your reputation, or your aspirations. He says, keep all the dreams alive, but discreet, so that those with unhealthy tongues won't have any other option than to infest themselves with their own diseases. Sometimes we open our mouth too much and let people know what's bugging us or what we're struggling with, because sometimes that information can give certain negative people the tools to attack you in a bigger way. The point being is sometimes we cause our own problems. Sometimes we cause our own struggles. There's times when even your role is not understood by everybody else. Maybe your passion, maybe what you want to accomplish in this world is not appreciated by other people. That's typical of people who do great things. Because honestly and candidly, very few people do great things. And there's reasons behind that I don't have time to get into now. But there are people that do great things because they choose to change their mindset in a way, not only their mindset, but their actions and their words that will allow them to sometimes separate themselves from the average and the ordinary. Because sometimes, not always, but sometimes the average and the ordinary don't get around to doing a whole lot. D.L. Moody said one time, if I take care of my character, my reputation will care of itself. This is kind of like what Dyer said. Again, if I take care of my character, my reputation will take care of itself. Rob Liana wrote, once you embrace your value, talents and strengths, it neutralizes when others think less of you. Think about that a minute. So once you know who you are, then it doesn't really matter what people say. Yeah, it might rock you a little bit. Maybe it might give you a little bit of doubt, like, am I really that way? But when you really know who you are based on years of experience or years of information or going through very difficult times in your past, then you really know who you are, and those words are just going to bounce off of you like it wouldn't bother you at all. John Hall wrote, "I will never stop thinking about Target CMO Jeff Jones' article." He says it's called "The Truth Hurts," as one of the best examples of being authentic, human content coming with a brand. When Target was under constant fire and undergoing big changes, many consumers started to lose faith and lose trust in the Target brand. Target's massive data breach combined with its CEO's departure fueled a huge PR crisis. And rather than hiding from it, the article says, Jones embraced his own voice and communicated an honest note with authenticity. He said the content he created to communicate his message humanized the Target brand. It wasn't a canned response to media and questions and attacks. It was honest and bold and received a positive response from everybody. Sometimes just laying it out there instead of dancing around the issue really gets stuff done a whole lot faster. When people see how authentic you are, whether it's good, bad, or ugly, that's not always a bad thing. Not always a bad thing. So you being real during difficulties, many times, not always, adds to your qualifications. The more I post online and the more people who know me, they see the good side of me, they see the bad side of me, and they see the ugly side of me. And maybe that ugly side, I don't want to be seen as much. I'm trying to work on the ugly side. We all have the ugly sides in us for sure, right? So when you decide to share your heart and share your mind, you're going to have people in your life that will either be attracted to you because of being authentic, people that will run from you because they thought that you were all that, and people that are going to attack you when they see who you really are. Now, in the Old Testament, David was crowned king. Saul messed up big time. Saul was the prior king, the first king. David was king number 2. So after a period of time, even though David was crowned king, he had to run for his life. I don't have the time to get into the whole story, but he ran for years. In fact, over in Psalm 142, David said, he says, "With my voice I cry out to the Lord. With my voice I plead for mercy to the Lord. I pour out my complaint before him. I tell my trouble before him." Now, I don't know about you, but if you know the Bible at least a little bit, David was one of the people that was honored. He messed up. Let me tell you, David was no perfect dude. I mean, he took care of his dad's sheep when he was younger. He made a name for himself through a courageous act. And then once he became king, he had a guy murdered so he could have this guy's wife. I mean, he was no jewel. He was no great guy per se. He really messed up. But in the scheme of his life, in the length of his life, he netted out to be a good guy. However, he really made some serious mistakes. So he went through some very hard times. And I think that sometimes you and I assume that because we've messed up or because we're not living in a place in our lives right now that we really want to be later, that later can't happen because of what happened before. I've been there. I know you've been there, where regret is just overwhelming our brain cells, that we think that we can't achieve certain things because of the screw-ups that we've made over the years. Doesn't hold water at all, because the greatest people throughout history for thousands of years have messed up consistently. I think about Peter in the Bible. In Mark chapter 14, there's a story where Jesus was taken away to be crucified. And his students, his followers, his disciples scattered, man, like rats. They just deserted Jesus. So while Jesus was being interrogated, Peter was by this fire warming himself, and there were a whole bunch of people around him. And they started to recognize that, wait a minute, aren't you a follower of this Jesus guy that was just arrested and he's going to be killed? And Peter's like, in Mark chapter 14, he's like, no way am I. And they started to curse. This is Peter, a follower, a student of Jesus Christ. He denied even knowing who Jesus was. So in fact, it got even deeper than that. The end of the story was he was so upset about it that he wept. He thought that there was no hope for him. So he thought that his role was finished. So he decided to go back to what he knew best was fishing. So in John chapter 21, there's a story where Jesus, after he was crucified and rose from the dead, the story says that Jesus came to Peter, which if I was Jesus, I would have been tempted to maybe reject Peter. Because if you say that you don't even know me after hanging around me for 3 years, I was teaching you a lot of what I know, and then when I needed you the very most, you ran away, I think it would have been pretty ticked off at Peter. Well, this is not what happened. Jesus confronted Peter. Peter was probably having a lot of guilt, full of guilt, right, as I would, as you probably would. But then he challenged Peter. My paraphrase is to get back up on the horse again and keep riding. Yeah, you got knocked off the horse. Yeah, you messed up royally when I really needed you. But then he challenged Peter 3 or 4 times to continue with his message of love. In fact, the actual term he used is to shepherd my sheep. And then he asked Peter 3 or 4 times, he said, Peter, do you really love me? And without getting to the nuts and bolts of it, every time he asked him that, Peter was saying, yes, I'm fond of you. I like you. But Jesus was asking him, do you love me sacrificially? Do you love me enough to do the things that might cause you pain? So that grieved Peter. Peter was like, what do you want from me? So Jesus kept saying, well, then I want you to do this. I want you to keep, my paraphrase, keep making a difference in people's lives. Even though Peter messed up more than once or twice. So if it can happen with Peter and that relationship between Peter and Jesus, it can certainly happen with you and I. Your mistakes don't automatically disqualify you from your destiny. Let me say that a few times. Your mistakes do not automatically disqualify you from your destiny. One more time. Your mistakes do not automatically disqualify you from your destiny. Got to remind you of that, because sometimes you need people to say, like I'm saying you right now, that I still believe in you even though you messed up. Because guess what? Guess who else messed up? Multiple times. This guy right here. And I had people around me, whether it was in written form or I watched them on some sort of recording, or very tight friends of mine that said, John, get back up on the horse and keep riding. The very best people throughout history have messed up over and over and over and over and over again. Guess what? You're going to mess up over and over again. So what are you going to do after you mess up the 10th time or the 22nd time? You get back up. So you and I need people in our lives who will be there to pick us up when we mess up. You need people, I need people in my life that's going to remind you, like I'm hoping I'm doing a little bit here today, to get back up on the horse even though you mess up over and over again. You and I need to be the ones who give permission to specific people who can yank you back up on your feet. Again, you need to be the one that's proactive and say, Joe, Susan, I need you to come alongside me, and if you see me mess up, I need you to thump me. I need you to yank me back up on my feet again. If not, guess what? People are not going to automatically give advice. People are not automatically going to encourage you to pick you back up on your feet again. It's up to you to say, this person, that person, just a handful of people, not the world, a handful of people that's going to come alongside you and pick you up when you think that you can't pick yourself up yourself. So the questions you ask can be a huge tool to pull you through struggles in your own life. So sometimes you have to ask your own questions. Sometimes you have to design an environment around you that's going to help pull you up along with the people around you. The fact that there are people around you that have strengths that you don't have, you need to be absolutely intentional about tapping into those strengths. And by the way, you have strengths that there are people around you that they don't know that you have. Why not leverage those strengths for the benefit of other people? There's some people who are not bothered by what you're bothered by. So seek them out. Tap into their strength. There's times when you have to keep pushing yourself in the middle of the most difficult times because it happens to everybody, has happened to everybody, so you are not alone in whatever you're going through. I'm telling you, you might think you're alone, but again, your calling may have nothing to do with your qualifications. What you eventually end up doing in your life may have nothing to do with what you were taught to do. Sometimes you have to be thumped in such a way or to be placed in such an environment where you say, you know what, I didn't realize that I could do this, or there was a need in this particular area, so that you have to be willing to see what's invisible, like other stories in Scripture have told us. So you have to be willing to step up, to ask for help, and realize that there's people in your life that want to make a change in your life for the better. My name's John Carver, and I appreciate you watching.